What if death isn't the end? What if it's a doorway? Now, imagine you stumble across an ancient manual, not just about dying, but about living. A guide so insightful, so precise, that it's been studied by the Beatles, cited by scientists, and even used by hospice workers across the world. This isn't a fantasy, it's real. This is the Bardo Thödol, more commonly known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a 1,200-year-old manuscript that was hidden away for centuries on purpose because its wisdom wasn't meant for just anyone. Not yet. It was waiting for a time like ours, for people like you and me. And here's the wild part. While most people think it's a book about dying, it might just be one of the most practical guides to living that humanity has ever created. So stay with me, because in this video, we're going to explore the secret architecture of your mind, how this ancient text maps not just the afterlife, but every little transition you go through in everyday life, and how mastering those transitions could lead to real freedom. Let's start here. The Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just some dusty religious scripture. It's not a list of commandments or moral rules. It's a map of consciousness. And it doesn't only talk about what happens after you die, but what happens in every moment when your identity shifts, when emotions rise and fall, when your sense of reality changes. It focuses on a concept called the Bardo. Now, Bardo is a Tibetan word. Bar means in between, and do means suspended or thrown. So Bardo literally means the state of being thrown between two things. And here's the kicker. You're in a Bardo right now. Every transition is a Bardo. The space between waking and sleeping, between joy and sadness, between your last job and your next one, between who you were 5 years ago and who you're becoming. The Tibetans didn't see these transitions as random. They saw them as opportunities. Each Bardo is a chance to wake up, to shift your relationship to experience, and to see the true nature of your mind. The text outlines 6 Bardos, 3 that happen during life, and 3 that occur during and after death. Let's walk through them quickly. 1. The Bardo of life. This is your normal waking state, everyday consciousness, from the moment you were born until the moment you die. Watching this video, thinking about what I'm saying, that's Bardo number 1. 2. The Bardo of dreams. This one shows up when you're asleep and dreaming. Vivid dreams, nightmares, flying, falling, or those weird lucid dreams where you suddenly realize, oh wait, this is a dream. That's Bardo number 2. 3. The Bardo of meditation. This is what happens during deep states of contemplation, when your sense of self begins to dissolve and you experience clarity that feels bigger than you. Have you ever sat quietly and suddenly felt a kind of vastness, like there's more going on than just your thoughts? That's the 3rd Bardo. And then the next 3 show up when we die. 4. The Bardo of dying. This begins as life comes to an end. According to the text, there's a process where the elements, earth, water, fire, and air dissolve one by one. And at the very end, there's a flash of something called the clear light, a kind of pure awareness beyond the body or thoughts. 5. The Bardo of Dharma. This is where you encounter what the Tibetans describe as peaceful and wrathful deities. But these aren't external gods. They're projections of your own mind, your psychological makeup laid bare. Think of it as meeting all your unconscious patterns face to face. And 6, the Bardo of becoming. This is the dreamlike state between death and rebirth. Here, your consciousness is said to be fluid, shaped by both your karma and your present awareness. It's a place where future lives begin to form. So why does this matter to you right now? Because once you recognize these Bardos, you're no longer just a passenger in your own life. You can start steering. Most suffering, the Tibetans say, comes from mistaking a temporary state for something permanent. We believe this is who I am, or this feeling will never end, when really, we're just in a passing bardo. And here's something incredible. This knowledge wasn't only for monks or yogis. It was intentionally buried as a treasure until the world was ready, like some ancient time capsule. So how did it come to us? In the 8th century, the great master Padmasambhava, often considered the one who brought Buddhism to Tibet, composed the Bardo Thödol. But instead of sharing it widely, he hid it, literally, in caves, sealed with prayers. It was known as a Dharma, a treasure text. Centuries passed, and then, in the 14th century, a mystic named Karma Lingpa discovered the hidden teachings during a meditation retreat in central Tibet. He wasn't just exploring physical caves, he was exploring the cave of the mind. He opened the door for this wisdom to re-enter the world. So, how do we use it today? You don't have to be a monk to benefit from this. You don't even have to believe in reincarnation or literal afterlife realms, because the Bardos aren't just about death. They're about every moment of life where one state ends and another begins. Let me show you a simple way to apply it right now. I call it the R.E.S.T method. R. Recognize what state you're in. E. Embrace the experience fully without pushing it away. S. See through its temporary nature. T. Transform your relationship to it by shifting your perspective. Let's try it with a real example. Imagine you've got a big presentation and anxiety hits. Recognize, okay, I'm feeling anxious, racing thoughts, sweaty palms. Embrace. Instead of fighting it, feel it. Breathe into it. It's just energy. See through. This isn't forever. 5 minutes ago, I felt fine. It'll pass. Transform. Shift focus to the awareness, noticing the anxiety. That awareness, it's calm. It doesn't change. You're not the anxiety. You're the space that holds the anxiety. That shift changes everything.
Let me tell you a personal story. There was a time I went through a brutal breakup. The kind that leaves you waking up every morning with a pit in your stomach, a weight on your chest, and this constant sense that life has cracked open in a way you can't fix. It felt endless. But then I remembered, this is a bardo. It wasn't just grief, it was a transition, a temporary state. The moment I recognized that, not as some spiritual bypass, but as a real shift in how I related to the experience, everything changed. That grief wasn't who I was. It was something I was moving through. And that gave me space. Just enough space to breathe. That's the power of this practice. You're not erasing your emotions, you're working with them, like a sailor adjusting the sail during a storm, not trying to stop the wind. Let's try another example together. This one's a little more everyday. You're in traffic. You're already late. Someone cuts you off. Anger rises. What do? Recognize. Okay, anger's here. That was a trigger. Embrace. Instead of yelling or bottling it up, feel it. Tension in your jaw, heat in your chest. See through. 5 minutes ago, you weren't angry. 5 minutes from now, you won't be either. This is just a moment. Transform. Shift into that quiet awareness that notices the anger without getting swallowed by it. That's the practice. You don't need incense or a shrine or a cave. You just need that moment of awareness, that pause. That's where transformation begins. Because here's the truth. The Bardos are everywhere. That moment between waking and sleeping, the weird emptiness you feel after quitting a job, the space between losing someone and learning to live again, the pause between breaths. The Bardo teachings teach us that all of these are powerful opportunities, but only if we notice them. And this isn't just ancient Tibetan wisdom anymore. Modern science is starting to catch up in some pretty amazing ways. At the Center for Healthy Minds at the University of Wisconsin, researchers have studied long-term meditators and found measurable changes in brain activity. These practitioners can shift their consciousness with intention from high-alert brain waves like beta into calm, dreamlike states like alpha and theta. Exactly the kinds of transitions the Bardo Thödol has mapped for centuries. Then there's Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist. He was one of the first Western thinkers to write about the Bardo Thödol in psychological terms. He saw the peaceful and wrathful deities described in the text not as literal beings, but as archetypes, as parts of our own psyche. Jung helped people navigate what he called liminal spaces, those weird in-between moments where your identity feels like it's dissolving. Sound familiar? That's a Bardo. And then there's the cutting-edge research on psychedelic therapy. At Johns Hopkins, scientists like Roland Griffiths have shown that substances like psilocybin can induce experiences of ego dissolution, feelings of floating between realities, and profound insight. Many of these sessions closely resemble the states described in the Bardo Thödol, right down to the feeling of encountering one's shadow or karmic patterns. Now think about this. When people use mindfulness apps, Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer, they're doing a simplified version of Bardo training. They're learning to watch their thoughts, observe their emotions, and not get carried away by every passing state. They're learning to R.E.S.T. Recognize, embrace, see through, transform. That's the real magic of the Bardo teachings. They're not asking you to convert or to adopt any dogma. You don't need to believe in reincarnation, because underneath all the symbols and rituals, this is really a manual for consciousness, a map of how your mind works moment to moment. And that's something anyone can explore.
Let's zoom out for a second. In 1964, a book called The Psychedelic Experience was published by Timothy Leary, Ralph Metzner, and Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass. It adapted the Bardo Thödol as a guide for navigating psychedelic states. For many in the counterculture movement, this became a spiritual manual, not just for tripping, but for understanding consciousness itself. And the influence spread. Did you know that John Lennon actually quoted directly from that book in the lyrics to Tomorrow Never Knows? That song wasn't just artistic experimentation. It was a direct translation of the Bardo teachings into Western pop culture. Turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. That's not just a lyric, that's an instruction from the Bardo Thödol. And it didn't stop there. The film Enter the Void by Gaspar Noé was practically a cinematic Bardo journey. First-person death sequence, floating consciousness, kaleidoscopic visions. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Even the Matrix can be seen through a Bardo lens. Neo's awakening, taking the red pill, that's a metaphor for entering a new state of awareness, realizing the constructed nature of your reality. That whole sequence where he wakes up in the real world, classic Bardo moment. And these ideas aren't just philosophical. They've entered the world of psychology and healthcare. Stanislav Grof, one of the founders of transpersonal psychology, used the Bardo model to help people make sense of their deepest inner experiences, especially during intense therapy sessions or altered states.
And in the 1990s, Sogyal Rinpoche wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, a more accessible version of the teachings, adapted for the modern world. That book sold over 3 million copies and is still used today in hospice centers to help people approach death with calm and clarity. Because here's the thing, even if you don't believe in an afterlife, the symbolic value of the Bardo teachings is powerful. Facing death, whether literal or metaphorical, can strip away illusions and help us get real about what matters.
Let's talk about the one thing we usually avoid: death. It's the great unknown, the thing most of us try not to think about until we're forced to. But here's where the Bardo Thödol gets radical. It says, what if death isn't the end? What if it's just another transition, another Bardo? Just like waking up, just like falling in love, just like heartbreak, just like every major shift you've ever experienced. According to this ancient text, the moment of death is not the final curtain. It's a threshold. And what you encounter on the other side depends largely on the awareness you bring with you. That idea alone changes everything. Because even if you don't believe in literal afterlife states or reincarnation, the psychological truth remains. When we come face to face with the idea of death, really look at it, not in a morbid way, but with full attention, something starts to shift inside us. That quiet panic that runs beneath so many of our decisions begins to settle. Think about it. How many times have you clung to a job, a relationship, or an identity that no longer served you just because you were afraid of the unknown? How often do we resist change, not because the new thing is bad, but because we fear letting go? The Bardo Thödol invites us to look directly at that fear, not to eliminate it, but to move through it with awareness. It says, the more we accept impermanence, the more freedom we gain. One of the most powerful stories comes from the 11th century Tibetan yogi Milarepa. He wasn't always a spiritual master. He had a dark past. He practiced black magic, hurt people, carried heavy guilt. But through intense practice, he faced every fear, every shadow. And eventually, he came to see death not as an enemy, but as a doorway. That realization liberated him, not only spiritually, but psychologically. He was no longer afraid of endings, and because of that, he lived more fully. That's the paradox the Bardo teachings keep pointing to. When you truly accept that everything changes, you find something inside you that doesn't. That something isn't your body, your thoughts, or your emotions. Those all come and go. It's the awareness behind it all, the thing that knows you're thinking, the quiet observer. In Buddhism, it's called Rigpa, or pure awareness. It's said to be timeless, unshakable, unchanging. And recognizing it, that's the real freedom. So how do we practice this? Not just read about it or think it's cool, but actually make it part of our daily lives. I'd like to offer you a 7-day challenge. It's simple. It takes just 5 minutes each morning. I call it the R.E.S.T practice. You already know the steps. R, recognize what state you're in. E, embrace it without resistance. S, see through its temporary nature. T, transform your relationship to it by shifting your perspective. Pick a time each morning, before your phone, before emails. Just sit and notice what's happening in your mind and body. Maybe it's calm, maybe it's chaos. Doesn't matter. Go through the 4 steps gently. No need to force anything. Then, throughout your day, be on the lookout for Bardo moments, those in-between times. That pause before you respond to a rude comment. That breath between leaving your house and arriving at work. That silence after an argument. That strange, floaty feeling right before you fall asleep. When you notice one, pause and run the R.E.S.T method, even just mentally, even for 10 seconds. You'll start to feel the difference. To help, keep a little journal. At the end of each day, jot down one Bardo you noticed.
how you responded to it, whether you felt caught or aware, what you learned from it. You'll be surprised at how quickly patterns emerge. Maybe you get pulled into anxiety in the mornings. Maybe anger spikes during your commute. Maybe sadness sneaks in after social media scrolling. Now you have a map. You're no longer lost in it. You're navigating. And when it comes to sleep, which, remember, is also a Bardo, try this. As you lie in bed tonight, before you drift off, bring a little awareness to the moment your mind begins to soften, the space between waking and dreaming. Don't try to control it, just notice. Many people report better sleep, even lucid dreams from this simple practice. And how do you know if it's working? Here are a few signs. You catch thoughts before they take over. You bounce back faster from emotional waves. You feel less reactive, more spacious. You start to notice quiet joy in ordinary moments. And sure, there'll be days when you forget. That's okay. Tibetan monks spend decades mastering these states. Be gentle with yourself. Celebrate small wins. Place little reminders around your life. A sticky note that says, pause. A bracelet. A phone wallpaper that reminds you, this too is a Bardo. You might even want to find a friend to share the practice with. Compare notes. Support each other. At the end of the day, here's what the Bardo Thödol is really offering. A path not just to die well, but to live awake. To stop sleepwalking through your life. To meet transitions with clarity. To hold both joy and pain with open hands. Because underneath all your experiences, good, bad, mundane, is an awareness that's quietly watching. It doesn't grasp. It doesn't fear. It simply knows. That's the part of you that doesn't die. That's what the Tibetans call the deathless mind. And the more you live from that place, the less afraid you become, not just of death, but of life. So I'll leave you with this. Every challenge you face contains a seed of awakening. Every ending is a threshold. Every transition is a chance to know yourself more deeply. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Bardo Thödol. Let's keep exploring. Let's keep waking up. Until next time, stay curious, stay present, and stay aware.